Word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together, and bless us as we look at your word. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. I'll tell you, tonight is going to be so exciting. that was, I appreciate that, Joy. It was a little patronizing, but it was still nice, you know. Yeah, that kind of cancels out the wheelchair. We're talking about people, figures, in the figures. Yeah. In Genesis, just so that we can get names, get the names down. Who have we talked about? God. God. What do we know about God? Everything. That's good, Miranda. Loving, powerful, da. Okay, so we talked about God. We talked about Adam and Eve. Cain and Abel. Noah. And the boys. Noah and the boys. That's right. Noah and the boys. Who else? Abraham and Sarah. Okay, that's right. Sarah. Cain and Abel. Isaac. His wife. Rebecca. Ishmael. No, his wife wasn't Ishmael. Because that would be the Adam and Steve. Yeah, well.
Where's your mind?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
It was just a name.
It just was a name that came to mind. Okay. Ishmael. All right. And last week we talked about. Okay, we talked about two brothers, right?
Well, I was thinking Lot's daughters.
Oh yeah, Lot's daughters. Oh, that was a good story. Yeah. Oh yeah. That was no, that'd be gross. That's really gross. All right. All right. So I was thinking of Abimelech. Yeah, the Veggie Tales. All right. Broccoli. All right. So we've talked about all those people. Now we started a narrative last week, because then they kind of overlap these narratives. And who were the two we introduced last week? Jacob and the red monkey man, who was named Esau. Okay, so we talked about Jacob and Esau. What is the relationship between Jacob and Esau? Brothers. But what kind of brothers?
Total opposites.
Well, true, but even more, they were twins. They were twins, twin boys. And who is the older?
Esau.
Okay, Esau, the hairy monkey guy, and that makes Jacob, and his name means cheat, liar, supplanter, not good, So is the younger. But what do we know that Rebecca also knows right at the beginning, before they were even born?
Jacob was going to be the one that was blessed.
Jacob was going to be the one blessed, was going to be the one carrying the promise. The older would serve the younger. And I mentioned it last week. In fact, we were talking about it a little bit today at Myrtle McHenry. One of the things that's really interesting as you look at like Genesis, the Genesis story, is what New Testament writers do with it. And they end up, reshaping the stories and interpreting them theologically. And this was one that Paul really used. Paul used Ishmael and Isaac, and that the promise went through the younger one, because Ishmael is older. But he said, as he was presenting this to the Romans, to make the point that God is in charge, and he is working out a plan that is merciful and compassionate, that God chose to use to favor the younger over the older. which is what he did with Ishmael. But Isaac, and then Paul, it's almost like he pulls back. But, somebody would say that Ishmael's mother was a slave and Isaac's mother was the chosen woman. Let me give you a better example, Jacob and Esau. And with Jacob and Esau, they were twins. Paul says before God, not based on anything they would have done or would do, God chose Jacob over Esau. And he even quotes Malachi. And in Malachi it says that talking for God, I loved Jacob, but I hated Esau. And based on what? Based on God. Yes.
That's interesting in reality, because when you have in families, it seems like the younger sibling always, not always, but in many times has more free and more leeway than an older sibling.
Oh yeah, I think that's the
I
case.
wonder.
Well, you mean after the war?
Would somebody turn on some lights? Yeah. At least the ones behind me, because I'm gonna have trouble
Yeah,
seeing.
they're more lax with the younger.
Yes.
I think that was true with us, but I think it was true because we were scared to death of the person.
Well, I don't know whether.
Well, I'm saying from us.
Yeah.
As parents, Phyllis. They're scared to death of the person. Then when you get them on their way in a second.
Well, but I mean more lenient and strict. I mean, I dated a girl that she was allowed to go to drive-ins and stuff, but her sister wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so, and I've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
The younger sibling has more freedom to do things than the older sibling.
But I think I think both of you saying the same thing. I think with the older, you're really concerned about messing up, and with the younger one, maybe some of that fear has been reduced a little bit.
Well, some of the stuff you were fearing,
Yeah, just didn't happen.
it wasn't really that fearful. You can be a little.
I know, and I think age has a lot to do with it too. I know in my family, my brother's 6 years younger, and my parents were just plain older. When he was my age, my parents were 6 years older than they were at that age.
So I imagine it was sort of progressive. We had the first one, really, wondering, don't do this, don't do this.
Yeah.
Had the second one, not as much. The third one, not as much. The fourth one, it seems like, well, just about anything here.
Right.
So,
Can pretty much raise it. Something else I think that happens, and then we'll want to get into I think sometimes there are rules that the oldest one has, and then the next one, who's younger, ends up having the same rules that the older one, only he's having it 2 years younger. And then the next one, as it gets, more and more slack as the person grows older, and now the other ones are following this rule. I remember when I was a kid, like 6 or 7, man, my bedtime was 7:30. It was 7:30. That's when I went to bed. And I remember when I was like 9, my parents allowed me to stay up and watch the Lucy show at 9 o'clock on Monday night. And that was a big deal for me, that you could do that. My brother, who was 3 years old at the time, also got to stay up and watch the Lucy show. And as my bedtime went up, my brother's bedtime went up. That's just the way it was. And I mean, he was, I think he was like smoking at 11. So it was a whole different situation.
He's the only as well, so that makes me the oldest and the youngest.
Yes. And the best looking.
And the middle one.
And the
too.
best. And my daughters, right.
like to think that we broke them. The oldest one broke them, so they really didn't care.
Right.
If we broke it.
If you had had a younger brother, right now he'd be wild.
Yeah,
He'd be probably in jail.
Probably have.
Probably
long
in
hair.
jail.
Probably have long hair. Long.
Yeah, a beard. You know.
I hate it.
Yeah, that's. I know the feeling, because he'd have a full head of curly hair. All right, but be that as it may, we were talking about Jacob and Esau. What happens with Jacob and Esau? We know Jacob's going to carry the promise, but how does that end up working itself out?
The opposite.
Well, how did it work itself out?
Because Jacob changed the.
Jacob plays a fast one and
Changed the contract.
gets the birthright and the blessing. Gets the birthright and the blessing. Bowl of soup. For a bowl of soup. Happened to be chicken noodle. Bowl of chicken noodle soup. You know, gave up his birthright.
Well, sure, I mean, he was hungry. It wasn't Jacob's fault. He just gave,
That's right.
She's giving him a pass.
Jealousy
She's giving
plays
him
the
a pass.
role.
Giving him a pass. Okay. So where did we leave it at the end of last week's session? What is the situation facing Jacob?
Mother's gonna kill him.
Okay, Esau is going to, well, remember we got these two stories that are kind of running parallel. You know, in one of the stories, Esau is waiting for the mourning period for dad to be over. And then he's going to do what? He's going to kill his brother. He's going to teach his brother a lesson. Okay? In that other, so that was one string. The other string, what happens?
Mama helps out.
Okay, yeah, because Esau's going to kill Jacob. Therefore, Rebecca says to Jacob, Jacob, you got to get out of town. And you better hide out with my brother until Esau cools off. And Jacob says, I'm out of here. The other strain is Esau marries what kind of women? Hittite women. And what are Hittite women? No good. No good. I have never known a Hittite woman that was any good. They're wild and crazy. Well, Joy's Chris. Joy's an exception. But Hittite women are no good. And they've been really giving Rebecca a hard time, and they decide Jacob should not marry a Hittite like his brother. And so rather than marry a Hittite, which would be horrible, they send Jacob back to marry a cousin. You know, because a first cousin is a whole lot better than a Hittite. Yeah. All right. So anyway, but either way, what happens to Jacob? He's gone. He's gone. Okay, he's left. All right. Now, where does Jacob? And now we're picking it up where we're supposed to, chapter 28, verse 10. Where is Jacob headed? And we're going to kind of move through this with a certain amount of intention. You know. So Jacob is going. Where's he going? Huh? What did you say?
Bethel.
Bethel. Okay, good. Bethel. I don't know. Something's in my ears right now. Probably having to stand like this. It's a real problem. All right. So he is heading and he's going to Bethel. And what happens to him when he's in Bethel? Something really kind of important. They name movies after this. They're movies named. They're songs and old favorite hymnals. What does he see?
A ladder.
He sees a ladder. Jacob's ladder. Right? He sees a ladder. And what's going on with the ladder? There's angels going up and down the ladder. Why are angels going up and down the ladder?
Because they don't have wings.
Because they don't have wings. So they got to go down. That's how they get from heaven to earth. They climb up and down this ladder. Okay, so Jacob sees this, right? And what happens to Jacob? Because he has this vision, he's asleep, has this vision, what happens to him? While this vision is going on. The Lord speaks to him, right? And what does the Lord say to him?
That he's the Lord, the God of Abraham.
Okay, he's the Lord God of Abraham and Isaac. And what does he say to Jacob?
The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants.
Okay. What then is established with Jacob?
Covenant.
Covenant is established. We got covenant established with Abraham, right? We had the covenant established with Isaac. Now we've got the covenant established with Jacob. And when he wakes up, he says, man, God must have been here, and names it Bethel, because he has seen God there. And remember, anytime you see El in a name, it has something to do with God. You know. So and again, this is a place, right? This is a city, becomes a city. And again, what he's doing, we're talking about a guy having a conversation with his son. You know, this little boy is how you got the city of Bethel. Okay. So anyway, so we've got Jacob having this vision. God makes this covenant, establishes it with a pile of stones, which would indicate for future generations. You see that pile of stone? That's where your ancestor Jacob saw God, talked to God. Okay. All right, so we've got the covenant established. So even though we knew the promise was going to go through Jacob, because we were there when God spoke to Rebekah, now we're here again when God speaks to Jacob. We know the covenant's going to flow through him. Okay? Now, on with the story. Chapter 29. What is Jacob doing? Okay, he's continuing the journey, because the journey is east. Right? Because it's going to Mesopotamia, right? Going to Laban, going to see Rebekah's brother, right? So he's heading out, moving out, and who does he run across? Or what's been a big deal in a lot of these stories? Wells become a big deal. Why are wells a big deal? Water. Water is a big deal when you're in an arid climate. Water's a big deal. So we got a well again, and we've got people that have flocks, right? Have flocks. Okay, what does Jacob discover as he's talking to these shepherds and their flocks? As he's traveling east, what does he discover right near the beginning of chapter 29?
Crossing people and ask them about Laban.
Yeah, do you know Laban?
We know.
Yeah, do you know Laban? And they say, Laban? Yeah, I know Laban. We know Laban. In fact, who's coming to the well? Okay, his daughter Rachel. Now this, again, is a little deja vu, because how did Isaac, sent the servant, but that's the servant met Rebekah at a well. Now we've got, only she was drawing water to carry. Now we've got Rachel with sheep coming to the well. Okay, and what does Jacob do for Rachel when she gets there? Because Rachel, what's the deal with this well? Yeah, you got to roll the stone. You got a cistern, right? And you roll the stone, and the water comes into a trough. So you've got to move the stone for it to empty into the trough. But somebody's got to move the stone away. And Jacob says, I'll do it.
Show off.
Showing off for Rachel, right? So he rolls the stone away, water comes, and Jacob does something that's pretty racy. What does Jacob do? He gives her a smackaroo, gives her a kiss right there by the well. You know, it was a wishing well, and he was wishing.
Very hard.
Yeah, he was wishing pretty hard. Okay, and he's pretty happy, right? Because he finds out what about Rachel? She's not a Hittite, you know. She's not a Hittite, you know.
And she is unhitched.
And she is unhitched, and she happens to be Laban's daughter. So, my goodness gracious, you know, they could have met at a family reunion.
Yes.
You know, because they're cousins. Yes, they're now kissing cousins. All right, but not third cousins. We are talking about first cousins. Yes. What? Wait. Okay. Well, if we're going to use this as a biblical guide for dating, then you should be dating your first cousin, but only if he brings a herd of sheep. You'd rather stay single. Okay. All right. So he kisses, and what does Laban do when he finds out that his daughter and his nephew are smooching? He runs. Yes. I would do the same thing if it were Maggie, but it wouldn't be to embrace. You know. Yes, there wouldn't be no embracing going on. So anyway, he goes and embraces and says,
Come on in.
yeah, come on in. You know, y'all, oh, it's great, you know, flash of my flag. And what does Laban want? So he invites Jacob home. You know, come on home, Jacob. Talk to me about my sister. Tell me about everything about my sister. And then what does Laban want? Well, evidently Jacob must be doing something. Well, we know something about Laban. What do we know about Laban from the past? Laban is not trustworthy. He's kind of a crooked guy. And Laban likes money. Laban likes money. So evidently, you know, part of the deal was, you know, Jacob was going to help Laban do something with the sheep. Because Laban says to Jacob, it doesn't seem right that you should be working for me and not get paid. So what would you like as a wage? What would you like as a wage? And you know, some things in the Bible are different, you know, culturally. There are certain traditions in the Bible that are different culturally than what we do now. This one isn't, because this happens in most families. Jacob says, you know, he says, what do you want? And Jacob says, your daughter. And then Laban says, sold. You know, sold. But the deal has got to be, you got to sweeten the deal a little bit. Because it can't be like working a weekend.
7.
You know, you got to work for me 7 years. Now, why 7?
The number 7.
Number 7 is really a big deal. Now, so Jacob says, yeah, I think I'll do that. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. Because why? What is it about Rachel that causes Jacob to say, okay, 7 years ain't bad?
It's rewarded.
It's going to be his reward. Well, why would he want Rachel as his reward? Because she's beautiful. I mean, she is drop down gorgeous, right? And at the Laban household, you got Rachel, who is beautiful. And then you got her older sister, Leah. And Leah was the kind of girl my mother would say, she's got a good personality. Leah Leah has a good personality. I've told you the story about my brother and Mrs. Gadro when we were leaving church one day, and my brother's 6 years younger than me. He's 6'2", has curly hair. And Mrs. Gadro says to him, she says, "Gary, you're so beautiful." She was from Brazil, had a thick Portuguese accent. She's about like 3 foot tall. She's a little bitty woman. She said, "Gary, you're so beautiful. You have such beautiful eyes and skin and hair and dun. And I am standing next to her." And she looks at me, and you could see the panic on her face because she has got to say something to me, right? And so she looks at me and says, she says, "You have nice teeth." Yeah, good. Yeah, nice. Not as good as your brother's, but nice. You know, it wasn't even beautiful teeth. It was nice teeth. Well,
Isn't there a tradition in a Jewish that you got to marry the oldest daughter before you can marry the youngest daughter?
that's certainly what Laban said. We kind of get the impression here that it wasn't a tradition. It was kind of a tradition that Laban made up on the fly. You know, that he kind of said, "Oh, by the way, this is our tradition." You know, the context doesn't appear to be. And this is very similar to the pain I experienced. You know, so I can identify with Leah because he says, the writer of Genesis says Rachel is what? Beautiful. And Leah,
That's a nice person.
well, he does mention something other than personality.
Go around.
Yeah.
The whole situation.
What's that?
She's got nice teeth.
Her eyes. Well, in Hebrew, the words he uses is she has cow eyes.
Delicate.
Yeah, she has cow eyes.
There's one cow.
Yeah,
Brown jerseys.
yeah.
Big brown.
Yeah, it doesn't say brown jersey eyes. It says she's got cow eyes. And it's a word used that you can translate a lot of different ways. And, you know, for some reason, most of them, some translate it as lovely, soft. Sometimes it's translated watery. Some they big, you know. But this is sort of like, and you have nice teeth. This is not, Leah is not going to win any contest.
Well, and did he say Rachel had, she's beautiful in appearance and form? Her forms, for the, under the garments that they wore, no, I would even that.
Well,
We're gonna sleep.
You've been around us too long.
oh no, you've had an influence on you. That's awful. All right, so Rachel is beautiful, but Leah is, and we're being set up for something, right? And Laban says you got to work 7 years, and then you can marry Rachel. And Jacob does what? He works 7 years only. According to the story, it seems like a couple of days. 7 years because he could see her, you know, he knows that this is the goal. You know, those are his wages. That doesn't sound very good. You know, he's being paid off with a human being. But we're not worried about that because this is just a part of the story. All right, so anyway, so he works 7 years. The big day comes, right? 7 years. Boom! Wedding day. Yes! Gonna marry Rachel. Yes! I'm assuming there must have been some heavy drinking going on before because evidently part of this ceremony involved Yeah, well, involved doing activities, mature activities. Don't look confused, Sandy. You're looking like you're confused. Okay, that part of the wedding is that the bride, who is all covered up, is sent in and it's really dark, and he can't see her cow eyes, and Jacob, and imagine Leah's self-esteem after this, as she's sent in, and the next morning, looking up at him.
I'm with cows.
She says to him, moo, moo, and he says, there's a lesson to be learned there. And what is the lesson, John?
Don't pick up somebody in the dark.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So don't hang out at bars.
You don't know what you're going to learn.
Yeah, that's right. You could marry a Leah.
Your alcoholic women.
Yeah. So alcohol in dark rooms are not good. Could have been worse. Could have married Ishmael. But so Leah, and as soon as Jacob wakes up, he says, well, Leah's such a nice person.
Yeah, nice personality.
Yeah, nice personality.
Nice teeth.
Nice eyes. Nice teeth. No, his reaction is what?
Holy cow.
Holy cow! Give Joy a round of applause for that! Oh, that was good! Oh, holy cow! That was great. He says to Laban, "What did you do?" And Laban says, "Oh, by the way, remember that contract you signed? About that 7-year deal? You didn't read the fine print."
Maybe it was a day over in the contract.
Well, the fine print says Leah has to be married first. And I've been trying to pawn Leah off for 7 years. So she's got to get married before Rachel. I'll tell you what I do, because I am a loving father and an honest man. You and Leah can have a happy wedded life for a week. And then you can marry Rachel. But you have to, we were talking about dating. You missed the whole thing about dating. I'll tell you, have your mom and dad explain to you what you should look out for. Because this is, if you happen to be dating somebody who has an older sister that has cow eyes,
It's not married.
and unmarried, run. Don't trust daddy.
That probably was going to happen anyway.
Well, it could. But it's not good. The result is not a good thing. Well, it depends on how you look at it. Some things are going to happen in the story that, depends on how you look at it. All right.
To the placement of her eyes, like on the sides of her head.
It is hard to determine. Let's just say Rachel was beautiful and her sister was more of a heifer. That was was sort of a, yeah. All right. No, that's right. That's right.
But it's only for a week.
But he's going to stay married to her. And then he's got 2 wives, which sure sound like it would work out, being married to sisters. Yeah, boy, that's going to be good. And especially when he's married to sisters and he loves one and really doesn't think much of the other. Okay? Because one is beautiful and the other one is...
about women.
Yes, okay. So anyway, so Leah is unloved. And somehow, I don't think the next 7 years felt like a day to Jacob. Okay. Seemed pretty long. Okay. And so now he's got 2 wives. Laban has put one over on him. He's got 14 years worth of work out of Jacob. Jacob has one sister he loves, and the other one he doesn't care much for. But that really doesn't seem to slow Jacob down, right? Because God looks down on Leah and sees that Leah is unloved. Leah's unloved. And Rachel is loved. So, and this should come as a shock to you. It never happens in the Bible. What is Rachel's condition? Barren. But Leah's condition is unbarren. You know, she is popping babies out right and left. So, evidently, his lack of love for Leah, he got over it. Awful. He got over it because Leah's doing what? Having one baby after another. And the first, Well, actually the first one didn't have to do with love. The first one had to do with the sandwich because they named him Reuben. All right. So he, I like Reubens. So Reuben was the first one. Rachel, no. Next one, Simon or Simeon. Rachel, no. Next one, Levi. Had to do with pants. Rachel, nothing. Next one, Judah. Ooh, Judah. Judah. I bet Judah is going to be important somewhere in here. Okay, Rachel, nothing. Now, this is not a good thing, right? And Rachel is not happy about this at all, right? And so, what does Rachel do? She does what any wife would do. She takes it out on Jacob, right? Because it's got to be his fault. Now understand, all of this is happening while he is working for Laban, right? You know, he's not done with his 7 years, you know, while he's having all these babies. Because we get the sense that he's having it there with Laban already.
2 7-year periods?
Yes, 2 7-year periods. You know, the difference is he could have his wives in the middle, you know, but he had 7 more years. Okay, so Rachel gets mad because it must be Jacob's fault that she's not having kids. And Jacob doesn't like that, you know, envies his sister, you know, she envies his sister. He didn't like it. You know, God is doing it to you. You know, this must be something that made you tick God off. And so Rachel does something that we have precedent for in the Bible, because who did it before? Sarah did it before with Ishmael. And so what does Rachel do? Sends in her maid. And Jacob says, well, if I got her, I got her. You know, and her maid, you know, starts having sons. Right? Okay. And she was a very simple name, you know. What? What? Dan? Yeah. Named him Dan.
Rachel was using the typical woman's logic. I mean, if he's having kids with her sister,
Yeah.
it can't be his fault.
Of course.
She's blaming him.
Of course. Because Jacob is sort of the ultimate player. You know, because he's doing all kinds of stuff. All right, now Leah is no longer having kids, right? And so Leah, so as not to fall behind, does what?
Sends in her maid.
Sends in her maid. And Jacob says, you know, if I got it, I got it. You know? And what did you say?
That's a man's dream.
This is a man's dream. You know, having 4 women telling him what to do. Yeah, that's all right. So she's having kids. So we got 4 women. Well, 3 women, because we got Rachel in it. And Reuben, the oldest and the tastiest, sees that his mother's not having kids anymore. And so what does he do?
Sends in his maid.
Well, yes, that's his maid. And his maid's name was Phil. He evidently there's a aphrodisiac, or they believe that mandrakes, yes, are like oysters, but they can't eat oysters. So he gets mandrakes. What is it, John? What is a mandrake?
It's a fruit of some kind.
I think so too. I think it's a plant. I know it's some kind of plant. Yeah. Well, he gets it. He gets it, and he's going to give it to his mom, right? And what does Rachel say to Leah? You've already had these kids, right? Give me some of the mandrake, right? And Leah says, not on your Nelly, and eats it herself, which enables her to do what? Have more kids, right? And since they're running out of names, she names one of them Issachar and the other one Zebulun. Okay, so we're getting kids, right? All right. So we got all these kids. And finally God looks down at Rachel. And everybody is having kids, right? Bilhah, Zilpah, Leah, Rachel.
No Rachel.
No Rachel. And so what does God... But as soon as we know that Rachel is barren, since we have read this story, we've been sort of involved in the story before, where is the promise probably going to flow? Probably going to flow through her. Now, what's going to be really interesting, and this kind of tells, you know, in a cultural sense, even a geographic sense, becomes really interesting. The children of, well, Rachel, who does Rachel, God opens her womb and she conceives and has a son named Joseph. Okay, Joseph. Now, what becomes really interesting, and we're going to see this in the stories, a lot of the Jacob stories are going to be associated with the northern part of Palestine. Bethel is in the north. So that becomes in Palestine, in northern Palestine. Remember, Isaac was a lot of stuff with Isaac was in the south. A lot of things with Jacob is going to be in the north. And one of the things that's going to be really interesting is the promise. We would expect the promise to flow through Joseph, Rachel, Jacob and Rachel, and then through to Joseph, right? But we've got another name that we already know is a son of Leah that seems like it's pretty important in terms of the promise. And what is that name? Judah is going to be not the first son, but actually the fourth son of Leah. So it's not even the oldest son. This is going to be really interesting as we look at the rest of Genesis. When we look at this promise business, who is going to carry the promise? Joseph is going to have 2 boys. One is going to be named Manasseh, and the other one is going to be named Ephraim. And Ephraim is going to be the tribe that what will become the northern kingdom is going to be associated with. It's going to be, and you'll see a lot in the prophets, they will talk about Ephraim. And Ephraim is going to refer to the people in the north. And the people in the south are going to be associated with what tribe? It's going to be associated with the tribe of Judah. And so we've got this kind of tension between the northern tribes focused on Ephraim and the southern tribes focused on Judah. And which direction the promise flows is going to be different depending on your geographic location. And through most of the rest of Genesis, it's being written from a northern perspective, because there's going to be no question that Joseph is going to be the hero of the rest of the story. But we're going to see little tidbits where Judah is going to play kind of a special role. Wait, you'll see. So that's an interesting thing that's going on in Genesis here. Okay, so we've got, but conceives and she bears a son. Now, why is she able to bear a son? Who's involved in this? God. Okay, so throughout all of this, God is, God's kind of involved in all this stuff going on. What's that?
He's behind the curtain.
He is behind the curtain. Okay. All right. So he's now got a son. Now, what's happening between Jacob and Laban? Because we've got all this stuff about Jacob and his wives and their maids, and now we get back to Laban. And what's going on between?
He must be supporting them all.
Well, he is, but what is Jacob doing? Okay, he's working, and what is he making as he works?
Nothing.
Nothing, because he's already gotten paid. His payment was a woman he doesn't like much and a woman he loves. Okay, but that's it. Okay, evidently we're talking about the end of the second 7-year period, right? And so what does Jacob want now? He wants out of there. Where does he want to go?
Back home.
He wants to go back home. Remember, God made a covenant. This isn't going to be his land. His land is going to be in Palestine, right? And he simply wants to go home. Now, what does Laban want?
Take the kids with
Labor.
Okay, he wants to keep the Laban, right? He doesn't want to lose that. Laban recognizes what's happened as a result of Jacob being there.
He's got a lot of grandkids.
He's got a lot of grandkids, but he's also prospered. Evidently, God must be blessing. Okay? So he doesn't want to give that up. Okay? It's going to be a hard deal to let Jacob go. So Jacob has got to make it attractive to Laban for Laban to let him go, right? So what does Jacob propose to Laban? Because Jacob wants to go. Jacob knows it's because of him that Laban's been prosperous. Laban had nothing before he came. And now that he came, Laban is a rich man. He's got herds. He's got all kinds of stuff. So Laban doesn't want him to go. Jacob wants to go. Jacob makes a deal with him. And this is typical Jacob. This is exactly what Jacobs do. What was the deal?
Give him his kids.
Well, because he's got flocks, right? Okay. What is it that he ends up? What is the deal that Jacob makes with Laban?
Start his own flock.
Okay, I'm going to start my own flock. And Laban said, I don't know about that. This is all mine. Why should I be giving it to you? And Jacob says, the only sheep and goats I want are what? What's that?
The ones that aren't.
The ones that are speckled or striped. That's all I want. And Laban, because Laban and Jacob, man, they're a pair. They are a pair. Yes, they're both foxes. They're both trying to out-cheat the other, right? What's that? Connivers, you bet. And because Laban says, D. And Jacob says, D. Yes. And what does Laban immediately do?
Regret his decision.
Not yet. he immediately does what to his flock? He calls all the spotted ones out and takes them 3 days away. So Laban says, you are welcome to all the speckled and striped animals in my flock. But he's removed them all. Now, evidently, he's not talking about going to the flock right now, but he's talking about, because they know more than the farmer knew in the parable we looked at, they know something about animal husbandry. You know, that if you've got speckled sheep and they have lambs, those lambs may be speckled. You know, so he has created the situation that where none of his sheep, when they mate, are mating with speckled sheep. So the sheep that are going to be produced are going to be white, right? Because he's taken all the ones that could change the genetic makeup, removed them. And he says, I have done the deed.
Well, unless some of the white ones are already.
Right. Unless some of the white ones are with sheep. But Jacob's smarter. Now, John, this is one of these things that would drive you nuts. Because it's purported to be a fact, just like the mandrakes. You know, it's purported to be a fact, and it is not biologically a fact. Because what does Jacob do? Well, he does something that's kind of odd. But evidently this is what somebody believed. What does he... So he's got Laban's flock, and it's all white. And Laban is saying, yeah, I got you now. What does Jacob do?
He probably knows by the features of the.
No. He breeds them. Well, but that's what Laban knew. You breed a white sheep, you're going to get white sheep.
Not necessarily.
But what does he do? He peels a strip off of pop and puts it in front of the flock. And everybody in this room, you all, because all of y'all are great sheep. I know. That when you do that, what happens to, and when you are breeding, and two sheep are breeding, and they're looking at stripped pop, what happens? They're going to have striped babies, speckled babies. And that's what ended up happening. You know, it's if you notice, and this has more truth to it than you think. You know, that's why most bedrooms don't have stripes. You know, because and if you look at, you know, when the wallpaper has flowers on it, sometimes there are interesting birthmarks. So I'm just saying, better to paint your walls. That's a kind of a racist thing to say, John. Nigerians, you know, Nigerians, or red, or all the colors of the rainbow. Oh God!
That must be now that.
Yes, well, see, this is a biblical. Yes, this is all in the Bible. You've got to change your perspective.
If it's colored, if it's painted all colors of the rainbow, then that's an explanation.
Yeah, that's right. Just saying. All right. So anyway, so he does this, and all the little babies come out striped and speckled and all sorts of stuff, which means that Jacob gets them all. Now, and now Jacob realizes that Laban is probably not going to let him get away with this. So he kind of gets his families together, and what does he do? He heads for the hills, right? All right. So he beats it out of town. And while Laban is shearing his sheep, what does Rachel do? So they try to get out of town fast before Laban catches him, right? What does she do? Now this is such a nice story. This is another Veggie Tales you never said. They never had the story of Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah. Zilpah was zucchini in the Veggie Tale. But so they steal. She robs him, right, and takes what? Valuables, in particular the household gods. Yeah, the idols. And she takes it and leaves. But God tells, which is kind of odd, tells Laban in a dream, you gotta do this. Jacob, take heed that you not say a word. So he's going to go and try to overtake Jacob, because Jacob's leaving, has robbed him, taken all the babies in his herd, and so he's going. But God says to him, what?
It's okay.
Don't kill it. Don't hurt it. All right. Now Laban finds it, right? Laban gets there, right? And again finds it at a place called Gilead, which is a place that is going to be important in the stories later. Okay, finds him there, and is ticked off, right? And how does Laban confront Jacob? Yeah, you cheated me. You snuck out of town with my baby girls that I love so much. And you're separating a girl from her father, and that's terrible. And Jacob, being a fine, upstanding person, said, "I was scared. I had to leave because I was scared. You wouldn't let me take the girls with me and take everything that I had, so I had to get out of town, right?" And so what does Laban? But Laban also says, I was robbed. Somebody robbed me, and I think it's one of you. And Jacob says, "Search the tents." Now we know what? We know that Rachel did it, right? And so when Laban is searching the tents to find his stolen property, who's got his stolen property? Rachel has got the stolen property, right? And Jacob says, which is almost as dramatic as Abraham on the mountain with Isaac. What does Jacob say to Laban? You can,
If I have it, you can.
that's right. If you find whoever stole your stuff, we know it was Rachel, right? So we know that Rachel stole Laban's stuff, and Jacob has just said, if you find the one who stole, kill her. No, not even yours.
Well,
you're going to die. She's going to die, or he's going to die. Yeah, capital punishment. And so we get, and again, this is such a good, well-crafted story. We got Laban doing what? First thing he does, check out Leah, right? And does he find anything in Leah's tent?
No.
Doesn't find anything. And then he enters Rachel's tent. And we know what's going to be in Rachel's tent. The jewels and the household god. And the music is getting really, really dramatic. But Rachel was no fool. What did Rachel do with the idols and the jewels? Nope, didn't do it. Even because he went through Leah's tent, didn't find it.
After he went through this.
No, it was even better than that.
She sat on
What did he do?
She sat
put them in or under her saddlebag.
That must not have been much.
Well, why the heck would she put it under the saddlebags? That seems kind of stupid. You know, why would she do that? Oh, yeah, maybe you wouldn't look there. That's not why she did it. According to the story, she said, Daddy, you're welcome to look under the saddlebags, but understand I've been sitting on the saddle and it's my time of the month. It was the way of women. And Laban looks at the saddlebags, looks at the saddle and says, no thank you. You know, no thank you. Right.
I've never heard that story before. That is in the Old Testament.
Oh yeah.
Right here.
What?
At the beginning of time, that's what we're going to do.
Okay, let's.
31,
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
Okay.
No, that's disgusting.
verse 35.
I believe it.
Yep. Now Rachel had taken the household god and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about in the tent, but could not find them. And she said to her father, let not my Lord be angry, not Lord God, little L Lord, that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So he searched and did not find the household gods.
Mine actually says period.
Yours said period? Oh, yes. You should read it in the Living Bible. But you know, and again, bad VeggieTale choice. Yeah, I don't even want to get into it. Why would this be an issue?
Because it's
Contact with blood and menstrual. The menstrual cycle was considered unclean. A woman going through her menstrual cycle was considered unclean. You know, and this is one of the reasons why we want to be real careful not to develop a theocracy, because according to the Old Testament, any woman on her cycle is ritually unclean because of the blood involved. And so if we're going to call women once a month unclean, you know, I think that might not be appropriate in the year 2019. That might not be a great thing to do. But anyway, so doesn't find the gods, right? You know, Joy, would you like to, I'm going to do like a teacher. Would you like to share whatever you told Chris with the rest of
I
us?
said, not if you're trying to get a date.
Not if you're trying to get
I don't want to call her unclean. Look, the Medlar's smiling. Look, John.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's also some things with men that we don't want to go into. Yeah. All right. So what ends up happening between Jacob and what ended up happening between Jacob and Laban?
I guess he got away.
Well, Jacob.
Children said on the way.
What's that?
Kisses the children, grandchildren, and say, have a good day.
That's pretty much. And they make a covenant. And it's kind of an interesting covenant because Jacob is mad now because Laban's accused him of stealing and Laban can't find the gods that were stolen from him. And then Jacob is now incensed, and that everything happened was, God's will and all this stuff. And he and Laban make a deal. And they build a pile of rocks. And what is the deal with the pile of rocks?
That's a covenant.
That's where they made the covenant. But the pile of rocks not only signifies a covenant, but also signifies a border. Because, that's right, Laban, this is your side. Jacob, this is my side. This marks the line. Laban, you can't cross onto my side. Jacob, you can't cross onto my side. And so that becomes the land. So by the end of this story, by the end of these stories, what's the situation with Jacob?
You've divided the...
Okay, divided. And where's Jacob? On one side. What side is he on?
North side.
Where he's on the north, but the Palestine side. Laban is over Mesopotamian side. Where Haran and where they are. So Jacob is in the promised land, the land that was promised him, right? What's his economic condition? Really, really, really good. What's his family situation?
Lots of kids.
Lots of kids. Now, it's interesting, and it didn't...
Well, would that be a surprise if God said you're going to be like the stands, right?
Right.
Your offspring.
You're going to have a lot of offspring.
Have a lot of kids.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of kids. Now, all of them were boys, right? All the kids mentioned were boys. One girl. What was the one girl? Dinah was one girl, and she was a daughter of Leah. So Dinah was a daughter of Leah, the only female mentioned. Okay, all the rest were boys. Okay, would kind of tell you that who's going to play a role in the story. Dinah's probably going to play a role in the story since her name is mentioned, and she will. And in particular with two of her brothers. And it's going to be the reason why those two brothers are not going to get a share in the land later. Their tribes won't get a share in the land later. Again, to explain, why answering a kid, why doesn't my ancestor yada da 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 have a share in the land? Well, let me tell you the story of Dinah. So that's going to come up later. So Jacob has a lot of property, has a lot of kids. How would you describe Jacob in a moral, ethical sense? Huh?
He's a Mormon.
He's a Mormon. Well, it seems like a good businessman. Yes, that's yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Earned his way.
He's an enterprising young man. And would you trust Jacob?
No.
Would you wouldn't trust Jacob? You wouldn't trust Jacob. Jacob's a guy in the Bible. What's that?
There are a lot of guys.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys in the Bible.
He was a good guy until he got crossed.
Until he got crossed? Well, remember, we got a clue about Jacob right at the beginning, right?
His name.
One, his name means cheat. Supplanter, somebody who weasels in. And when he was born, what was he doing? Hanging on to his brother's heel. So his origin, and remember when his mother said, let's do this thing to get the birthright. Jacob said, no, not me. That would be dishonest. That would be deceiving my father, whom I love and respect. Yeah, smart businessman. Yes. Yeah, put a little lambskin on your little goat fur on your arms and you can get away with murder. So Jacob will continue to be Oh, he'll be a piece of work. Because we've got still we don't have everything tied up. We got Laban and Jacob. The Laban-Jacob story is done, right? Because they're separate. One side, other side, they're not going to come in contact. But we've got something that's unsettled, right? What is it that we've got still hanging out there that's unsettled? Well, we got 2 sisters, we got the wife. We got a big brother who, remember, according to that one strain, was going to kill him. Was angry enough to kill him if his mom hadn't said, get out of town. We still got Esau hanging around. And he has had a good 14 years to stew in his juices. So we've still got Esau hanging out. Next week we'll look at the resolution of Jacob and Esau. And Jacob is, if you think Jacob was a good businessman now, wait until next time. He is a good businessman.
I got a theological question behind all this. If God is behind all of this, and Jacob is such a whatever conniving man, what's the theology? What is the message
What's the
of
point?
Story?
Yeah, what's the point?
From the Jew?
What is the point?
The history of how the Jewish nation started.
This is a history of how the Jewish nation started. Why is the story of Jacob? And we saw the same thing though with Abraham. Man, we saw the same thing with Noah. We saw it with Abraham. We saw it with Isaac. We're really seeing it with Jacob. And by the way, Jacob, next week, his name is going to change. His name is going to change. And Jacob is going to, what's that? He's going to be what? Paul? Oh, Paul. Oh, I thought you said bald. And I thought, Chris, that's getting a little personal. It's going to be changed to Paul. He's going to be named, his name's going to change to Israel. His name is going to be Israel. And because he is going to be the father of Israel. So his name is going to be Israel. So Jacob, but we see, now why is it both surprising and significant that we've got these kind of negative stories about what are the people called the patriarchs, the fathers of our nation?
I don't know where we're at with that, but it does seem like these smarter, littler guys seem to be outsmarting the bigger, tougher, meaner guys.
Okay.
Yeah, but God's supposed to be behind all of this. So if God.
Okay, the guys that have the most power aren't winning.
Yeah, they're not winning it.
Yeah.
The little smarter guys outsmarting the bigger, tougher, meaner guys.
Okay, which is showing what?
Intelligence kind of.
Well.
But let's look at it on a higher. Let's look at it on a theological level.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, it shows it that God is allowing those that are weaker to overcome those who are stronger.
Well, but
Okay,
yeah,
I think that's certainly involved in it.
But in a conniving way.
Well, what else is involved?
Not being perfect.
These are not perfect people, which shows that God is working through imperfect people to accomplish His will. Now, why might that in and of itself be important to us? Because we're imperfect. That God, instead of God working with Achilles, God is working through Jacob. It's not Odysseus. It is through Isaac. And these are flawed people. And, yeah.
So if this is the theology and the history of the Old Testament, could that or is that a reason why the Jewish people have always been looked down upon and mistrusted? Because of these stories?
Well,
because of
probably not But I think the theologians in the Old Testament, and all of these are theologians, these storytellers are theologians. You look at the great figures in the Old Testament. I mean, we're looking at the patriarchs, and they are huge, right? I mean, these are the big guys. But then later, Moses, right? You know, so we got time. Moses. Well, was Moses imperfect?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. One, that's why God wouldn't let him go into the promised land. Because he got mad when God said, touch this rock, because the people were complaining, because the people of Israel always complaining. He says, touch a rock and water will flow. Well, Moses gets mad and whacks the rock. And God says, man, you know, I told you to touch it and you did it. You can't go in the promised land. His brother Aaron, the first priest. You know, you talk about the Aaronite priests. The first high priest. Was he flawed? Oh yeah. He let the people, when Moses was on the mountain, worship a golden calf. You know. Look later into the king. Was Saul flawed? You bet he was flawed. David? Yeah. You know, he was flawed. Solomon? You betcha. He married foreign women and allowed them to worship their gods.
And when Jesus came, that completely changed 180 degrees because he wasn't flawed.
Well, that's right, because he was God. Oh, Christians believed he was God. What I think the Jewish theologians are trying to tell their people is don't put your faith in Abraham. Don't put your faith in Moses. Don't put your faith in David. Put your faith in God. Because all of those people are flawed. God is the one that can overcome human flaws and bring about his will. In fact, God can even work within human flaws to bring about his will. And I think that's what the Jewish theologians hit over and over again. Even
today.
Even today. And even when you look at the prophets. Jeremiah, flawed individual. Ezekiel, flawed individual. You know, these are people who weren't perfect by any means. You know, that's why when Moses dies, they don't even tell where he dies so that people won't worship his grave. So he won't become, you know, a source of worship. Because these theologians are writing about flawed people. These are not heroes. These are heroes with feet of clay. And you don't see that in the sagas. You know, you don't see that in some of the other cultures of the time. You know, where the origins of their nation were demigods. You know, that brought about the Marduk in Babylon. You know, there's a demigod and defeats dragons, and you get very human people that become the origin of Israel. The fact that they're doing that to us nowadays, we can read it and not be so woe by it, because we would kind of expect, we knew at best these are human beings. But when you look at 4,000 years ago, when there was a guy named Parson Weems. Has anybody heard of Parson Weems? Parson Weems wrote a biography of George Washington in, I'm thinking, 1804. And Washington dies in 1799. So Washington has been dead 5 years. And Parson Weems writes a biography of George Washington. And it's in that biography of George Washington that we get things like,
Cherry tree.
I cannot tell a lie. I cut down the tree. Throwing a dollar across the Potomac. We get these heroic stories of George Washington. And Parson Weems knew exactly what he was doing, but they weren't true. You know, they were myths. And he knew exactly what he was doing because he believed the country needed a demigod, needed to believe its origin was not just by a normal human being, but by someone who was special, was above normal.
So,
you know,
and that carries over to, I'm not going to say all, because I can't say all, but most of the cultures
absolutely
in the world today, they all have a
Yeah.
demigod that
but
created.
not the Jews. because the origins of the Jewish, the origin of the Jews is Noah who gets drunk on wine. The origin is about Abraham who lies about his wife twice. Is about Isaac that lies once. Is about Jacob whose very name means cheat and liar. So this is an intentional thing that they want the focus of the people to be on God, not on the heroes of their past.
Well, and that even goes into the New Testament when Peter denies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Great point, because that is exactly what I think the evangelist Mark takes great pains to do, is to reduce all the apostles down. Yeah, Mark, that's great. That's really, I had never thought about it, that kind of connection. But Mark is doing the exact same thing with the apostles, knocking them all down. All of them are failures. All of them fail. The other evangelists kind of aren't quite as passionate about that. But Mark is going to knock them all down, because your focus shouldn't be on what Peter did. Your focus should be on what God and Jesus did, what God did through Jesus. That's where your focus should be. Anything else is a distraction. And I think that's what we have in the Old Testament. Okay, next week we're going to look at, we're going to look through chapter 36, and it's going to be the resolution of the Esau story. So we're going to go back to Jacob and Esau. And
36 or what?
Chapter 36 from 32 to 36. And we're going to, as we go through these stories, they're all going to be tied. So the narrative is going to be smoother. Because remember, we looked at before, it just seemed, we had all this war and then wells and all this. From this point on, it's going to be a lot smoother story.
Well, this was good theater.
Well, that's what it is. You're exactly right. It is good. It is good theater.
Come with good curtains.
All right, let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together. Bless us as we continue to live the life you've called us to live, and remind us that we don't have to be superior human beings to be led by you and to be blessed by you. Keep us mindful of that in the name of Christ, we pray. Amen.